I believe that there's an alliance between Trump, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin, and I believe that the takedown now is of that age-old cult of Baal. I believe that that cult is being taken down right now. So is Netanyahu going to come out at the back end of this rinse cycle? No, absolutely not. What is Israel in any event? Israel is a state of being. So there was never supposed to be a state of Israel. We're no longer in the embrace of satanic forces.
Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am joined by none other than Sacha Stone. I've been waiting to talk to this cat for ages. Finally, he's here with me. So I'm very excited for him to be beaming in with us. Sacha, how are you, brother?
Very good. I'm very happy to speak to you and to meet with you this fine day. I'm sitting in Mexico,
nice,
in the Bacala Laguna on the Mayan Riviera. Couldn't be more perfect day.
Beautiful. I'm sorry if I've got you inside. It's probably gorgeous out. I'll try not to keep you too long.
No worries.
Oh, so there's so much to talk about. It's I didn't know where to start because so much has happened, in the last year, and it's just. But I figured a good place to start would be kind of, this shit show we're looking at right now. I'm wondering, do you think that we're in a war over global resources that's kind of being justified by religion, or do you think that this is actually a religious war being disguised for global resources?
We're at if we want to refer to it as a war, and it's fair enough to view it that way, then it would be a war for galactic resources. It wouldn't be planetary resources. That we're living in a torsion field, a scalar equation, a fractal universe, and really whatever's playing out in front of us right now cascades, all the way up into the ethers and into the galactic plane. So let's be crystal clear about that. The galactic wars are playing out on the Earth plane, and we're a kind of refraction, echo, shadow in that sense of what's taking place. But what's so important about where we are situated is that we are at the tip of the spear of creation in the void, in the abyss. And the human the human genome becomes an extrapolation of the galactic genome. So we are a composite of all of the star nations made manifest in temporality, in time, space. Here we are. And we're infused with something that no other entities or elements are in the void, and that is that we have divine will written into our program. So our will, in that sense, defines the outcome for the galaxy, for the star nations. So really, if we've got to view it as a war, we've got to step back from this kind of notion that it's a war for oil or gas or the petrodollar supremacy or for, it's all of those things, and it's a whole lot more. It's also global depopulation, which is creating food constriction, creating scarcity economics, and continuing cycles of usury and debt and blood economy and war economy. That's all to do with the greater Babylonian enterprise of sacrifice, innocence, and the harvest of humanity. But none of that fucking matters, and that's the point. What matters is the degree to which you and I acknowledge and exceed our divine mandate in the here and the now. That's it, baby.
I love that, man. In the end, truly, that's all any of us can really do to really affect our race. And there's while I have and a lot of respect, I know people who are really kind of on the front lines, if you will, speaking out against what's happening, and they have every right to. And some of them have, been part of the armed forces, been part of the intelligence services, and they're trying to wake people up as to, the disguise, the veil that's been pulled over for so long, and there is a place for that. And I can't argue with that. I'm an advocate of that, but the larger battle is going to be internal for us, as this incredible human species that we are. So I am with you. I agree with you, but it's people are so mesmerized by the illusion, the matrix. It's a really mesmerizing configuration that we're plugged into.
It's technology. It's a technology. The Matrix is a perfect technology that invites us to remain indentured and enslaved and subjugated to third-party intervention, to things outside of self. So the organized religious mind, of course, is the one that's most under savage assault. And the more we give ourselves to a third party or to an agency outside of our immanent divine nature, the more we become fed, we become feedstock to that phenomenon. And that's really what we've seen in the last 500 years. We've seen how the time and the motion and the blood and the bones of and the life force of humanity have played into this thing called government. Government, the technology of mind control, which is connected to time and the illusion of time and the idea that we're running out of time and running out of resources. And so we then throw ourselves at the mercy of that third-party intervention, which was initially the priesthood and the Vatican, essentially, which became government, which is privately owned corporations masquerading as government. So that's what we now see clearly, and we're seeing a breakdown of it. Because it no longer it's served its purpose in that sense. It's no longer serving the next dialing up of the evolutionary stage of human consciousness. So we can really dispense with government altogether. We can dispense with religiosity altogether. We can dispense with all third-party intervention.
Central authority.
Yeah, well, this time that we're going through right now, this end of time is all about how we reclaim absolute autonomy. My entire focus, just so you know, is on economics, on defining the new economy. So we launched this coming week, we launched the New Earth Exchange. It is a piece of history. It's the greatest thing I've ever done or been involved with, and I've done some pretty remarkable things and been involved with some wonderful things. But this is extraordinary. It's taken us years, and we're ready to unveil and launch an entire parallel global financial system with a banking system, a treasury, international exchange, ghost wallets, and the capacity to freely trade and exchange amongst ourselves and transact absent any third-party intervention.
Wow.
So that's the big focus for me, because so long as we are still suckling at the tit of the parent corporation, relying on government to feed and shelter us, or to issue the statutes that decide and determine whether or not we can feed or shelter ourselves, we are literally owned and subjugated. So we have got to claim full autonomy on our social ecology and our social economy. That's been the focus of New Earth and my crew. And come Wednesday, we believe we'll see another book.
Well, we're going to definitely circle back to New Earth, because that's so exciting, and I want you to tell my audience a lot more about that. So, because people are in a state of distress, rightfully so. They're in a state, they can sense that there's a massive transition. Also, you could also call it a collapse that is imminent. And there are people who are going to say, "Well, it's been imminent." Well, yeah, but it seems to be culminating now. In a way that it hasn't before. I don't remember. The debt alone is absolutely crushing. It can't be sustained. So people are like, what the hell is going to happen if this house of cards finally falls? And so the fact that you're talking about, well, look, there's solutions. They've already been thought over. They've already been designed. That gives me great hope, that we got a chance at making this transition hopefully as bloodless as possible, because there has to be this revolution. There has to be a transition. This is unsustainable with this debt and the debt enslavement system that we see, and people just, them keeping us sick, spraying the skies, the way that they do it is it's just diabolical. There's just it's a complete dehumanization of the majority of humanity, for lack of a better.
We're the ones keeping ourselves sick, and we're the ones entraining our attention, our focus, which is our life force, our prana, toward false values and false ideas and false gods. So the moment we stop permissioning ourselves to be indentured to those false gods, they relinquish us, because they were only ever there to serve us. The devil always serves God's design in that sense.
Yeah. I heard someone say something very controversial the other day, and I got in trouble for it, which I was like, wait, doesn't anyone understand like the paradox that's true in this? They said that what Epstein did, of course, was horrible, what was atrocious. But what Epstein also did was bring to the public forefront what's been happening behind closed doors for a long time, in a way that maybe no one else could have. So in that sense, you could say that something good did come out of it, because now these people are being exposed. At least we know that it went from a theory to, oh, damn, yeah, the conspiracy theorists are right. This is really happening. Yeah, no shit, it's really happening, So, but then people jumped on this person and were like, you're saying Jeffrey Epstein was doing good? No, I'm like, that's not what she was saying. But, nuance has been hunted into extinction in our modern day.
On that particular score, I have to say that I was one of those very, very few voices who was screaming about Jeffrey Epstein 8-9 years ago. So I convened the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, which I founded, and then convened the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Human Trafficking and Child Sex Abuse in 2018 in Westminster, in London. I appointed Robert David Steele, former CIA spook, as chief counsel. I assembled the bishops and the judges and the secretaries of state and all the various important personages who flew in from around the world to the 3-day seatings. We dodged bullets in order to pull that off. And we were the ones who unveiled or unleashed the specter of Pizzagate and Jeffrey Epstein and Les Wex and all the other names that came out. So that's something which many years ago I was diligently investigating and researching and exposing, doing everything that we could to expose. And we did that, began that process. I believe that history will reflect that we began that process in 2018. Certainly, Supreme Command in the US seem to think so, because they've already accoladed us for that fact for what we did in 2018. But anyway, that was then. We're now here. And I'm personally pleased to look over my shoulder and see that people are taking that stuff seriously, because it is desperately serious. And as people who listen to my warbling know, I have never once given an interview, and I give half a dozen interviews a week sometimes. I mean, I'm constantly giving interviews, and I have not done one single interview without referencing Satanism and the forces that we are working to rid ourselves through and of. So the whole business of understanding that blood ritualism and sacrifice of innocence and sodomizing infants and goes back to Cain and Abel. This is an ancient Babylonian practice. It's never changed. It became a lot more sophisticated over the aeons. But here we are, and we're transitioning now from a satanic regime of the last 13,000 years, certainly the last 7,000 years. We could look at the nadir point of the grand procession of the equinox 7,000 years ago and see that was the lowest ebb, in a sense, of the grand cycle of time. So let's just suggest that the last 7,000 years was the real galactic sleep, and we've emerged now from that into the ascension paradigm, in a spiral into the age of Aquarius, so to speak. And that brings with it a new quanta of vibral light, a new geometry of light altogether, as we broke through the ecliptic some time ago and are now moving into this age of Aquarius. That takes us into the quantum. We're moving beyond a duality, beyond binary logic, beyond polarization, beyond red, blue, black, white, up, down, left, right, he, she. We're moving now into the quantum. And that is also to say we're moving from a satanic age, a Saturnian satanic age, through a luciferic age now, which we're just entering into. That's going to be a period of time, but it's the end of time because we've already moved beyond time. The point I'm trying to make is that we're no longer in the embrace of satanic forces. We are now into the loosest forces, the luciferic forces, and that's not a bad thing. There has been a tremendous mistake that people have made by confusing Luciferianism and
can you elaborate on that, because that is a big thing.
It's huge. Thank you for arresting the question, because it is desperately important that people understand it. As I've been saying somewhat cautiously in the last few months, one could almost speak about the Donald Trumps and the Elon Musks of this world as being luciferic icons. They are of the false light, in as much as they're still speaking to dominion and control and power and the pyramidal systems. But they are absolutely salvation principles as well for humanity. They are taking us away from the blood rites, the blood rituals, the satanic ritualism, the inverted perversions of Saturnian logic, which has governed us for thousands of years. So in that sense, the Trumps and the Musks of this world, although the good a good balanced mind looks at them and goes, well, six of one and half a dozen of the other. Like,
Yeah.
you cannot get to that point without being profoundly contaminated and compromised. That is true. That's absolutely true. But the question is, on what side of the fault line do they land? And they both categorically land on the fault line, the side of humanity and God's creation, and not the desecration of God's children and God's creation, which is what the satanic forces, the Biden, Pelosi, Bill Gates,
Certainly Netanyahu, I think,
well,
falls.
all of that,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. I mean, you see how it'll become revealed that Trump was trolling Netanyahu, and the Zionist crypto Jewish brigade have been trolled by Trump. So it's kind of a false alliance that was struck there. It's all appearances and a theatrical production. But I think humanity will find. I think history will look back and see that Trump was a very necessary kind of a universal icon, in the sense that he was the great disruptor and acting as a bridge from the old fallen light of Atlantis into this new Earth horizon, a very necessary one. No one else could have done it. No one else had the skin of a rhinoceros to be able to withstand, death by 1,000 poisoned darts.
Yeah. I see him trying to pull away from people like Netanyahu, but Netanyahu is like a pit bull with something in its mouth. He's not going to let go of this. I see Trump trying to ease back from this war and from what he's been doing in Iran. And it's clear from what he's saying to the press that he's trying to find an exit ramp, as to use a word that they love to throw around. But at the same time, you have Netanyahu who has been outspoken against, saying Trump may think that he has a deal, but we're going to keep bombing. We're going to keep bombing Lebanon. We're going to keep bombing Iran until our objectives are met, which of course they won't ever share their objectives because we know they don't have any. They just want to expand. But how do you see this playing out? How does Trump extricate himself from this? We know there's a massive blackmail ring. We know he's surrounded by people loyal to Netanyahu, or he would have never probably got into the war to begin with.
I believe he's trolling. I believe he's been trolling for decades. And if you understand or understood the true genesis of Donald J. Trump, and frankly, you don't know it, and people don't understand who he is and what he is and who he was back in the 1980s. So this is a storyline that is going to emerge shortly, and the world will see it in Technicolor, I believe. It is connected to how he has been an informant for decades and part of a controlled demolition exercise against the satanic status quo. If you go back to Donald Trump's 70s and 80s and listen to what he says, study his syntax and his geopolitical and even philosophical sentiments, you learn a great deal more about the man. He's become very kind of bombastic and belligerent in his old age. I personally like that about him. I understand how and why it's offensive to the liberal intellectual mind, but I couldn't care a fuck about the liberal intellectual mind. I care about the indivisible line that we're navigating now as a species, and who's navigating, who we on that line with. There are archetypal characters like Donald Trump and like Elon Musk and like Vladimir Putin, who are incredibly important icons in that navigation process, where we are beginning to see the contrast of the Netanyahus, and one could even say the Deepak Chopras of this world, these other false icons. And I don't wish any harm against Deepak. I like him enough, and he's been kind to me over the years. But the fact is that just seeing how so many of our idols are being exposed in that sense, even within ourselves. I mean, just elements within ourselves are being purged and cleansed. Each of us are being held over the fire, in a sense, because there is a great purging going on. And it's an individual process as well as a collective one. But I just say again, Donald Trump is a vital, I said a universal icon a moment ago, meaning to say he comes with a universal mandate. It's a very important mandate, which is to break the fucking spine of the fallen light of Atlantis as an age, as an epoch. Literally snap the spine in two. And lay it to waste. The relationship between him and Netanyahu, you speak obviously as a well-informed pundit, but with the greatest love and respect, well-informed pundits are still very ill-informed in the scheme of things. I'll give you an example. I've had to learn this over the years. I've learned this from intelligence. I've learned this from white hats. I've learned this from military. Anyone attending any of my private tours where I speak to my own audience, I showed thousands of photographs and images to prove this stuff out. I never speak to this stuff on social media. I know when I can speak to the public face and when I speak in the private. So in my private, I speak to this at great length. The world is not what we think it is. I have the experience, and again, I can prove this, but only in the private. I'll give you one example, which I will speak to here. If you remember Leona Helmsley, you may not be old enough to remember, but in the 1980s, anyone who was reading newspapers and watching the news, BBC in the 80s, remembers Leona Helmsley. She was the queen of mean in New York City. She was a billionaire hotelier. She owned hotels and land, and she was an absolute bitch. No one liked her. She was a ferocious looking woman. She was incredibly unkind and cruel to the thousands of people that she employed. She was famous for it. She got tripped up on some technicality, rather like Al Capone, and ended up facing very serious prosecution by the IRS. There was a show trial, which would have gone away, except for the fact that the bitch was so silly that she made the statement, "Oh, taxes are for little people." And that became a thing. That became a meme all around the world. The whole world wanted to take down Leona Helmsley. Now, she was in her, I think, late 70s. She was an elderly woman. But she held her own in the court, and she cruised through the trial, and she was facing, banged up ostensibly for life. At the end of that trial, she was the most hated person in the world, and she was marched out the back of the courtroom, to serve the rest of her life out in a prison cell. That's not what actually happened. Now, I heard this from Scotland Yard directly. It took me for lunch about 5 years ago when I was doing one of the tribunals. And I was dealing with a number of police and important people in the intelligence community who were giving me advice on how to navigate not getting killed doing what we were doing.
Right.
Dealing these Satanists. So the point is this: a top brass, and I mean top brass, Scotland Yard guy told me at lunch that on the day of that trial of Leona Helmsley, she had been walked out the back of the court into a van and taken to an airfield. She was flown in a private aircraft, landed at Northolt Air Force a number of hours later, which is the Queen of England's private airstrip in England. And she was picked up by this guy who was having lunch with me. He said he was the rookie at the time, one of the rookies sent to pick her up from Northolt Airfield, take her to the Thames estuary, put her onto a launch, which was taking her out into the channel, and she spent her trial and the rest of her life on a super yacht and invisible. The point being, that was happening in the 1980s. That was the Leona Helmsley truth of what happened to her.
Right.
I'm the first person to ever say this in public on your show, incidentally. But so people don't know this about them, but that's the truth of what happened. So ask yourself, is the Ayatollah dead, or is he sipping a gin and tonic with Jeffrey Epstein in fucking Tel Aviv on a beach?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I also had last week, I met with Mossad, top Mossad, somebody who I actually know and love and trust. Okay, strange to hear myself say that, but it's true. Very, very keyed into the intel community in Israel. And I'm assured by that individual that they are on the beaches in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
That what we're seeing is CGI. It is so much of an orchestrated theatrical production. So again, let's not believe what it is we hear about or are led to believe about the relationship between Donald Trump and Netanyahu. That's my point.
Well, I certainly never believed anything they said about Jeffrey Epstein killing himself, and the fact that he's Maduro, and I'm like, dude, Maduro is gonna live out a great life. Trust me. Like people are like, he's gonna stand trial. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever.
No, it was arranged months and months and months ago.
Like some of those things are quite intuitively obvious to me, anyway.
Right.
But I do have trouble reconciling the fact that the nation of Israel, obviously we know historically was essentially bought by the Rothschild banking family, which is one of the families that is largely responsible for this modern day debt enslavement system. I know it's been around since the Knights Templar. I know it goes way back, but at the same time, it was very much modernized and brought out into each of the continents, by the Rothschild family, and they put their money where their mouth is, and they bankrolled people like the Morgans and the Rockefellers, and they started to twist industries to their own monopolies. And so when I see what appears to be, obviously, I know you're saying there's more going on than meets the eye, and I know that to be true. But it also seems to me that this war is being fought, because of Israeli influence, also known as Rothschild, massive power influence through any means necessary, probably a combination of blackmail and threats, because I mean we know they're not scared to take out a president. They've taken out people for less. So how do you reconcile that? Because what I see is the person who I voted for and who I believed when he said I will end this war, I will not start new wars. I see what appears to be him, selling out to these very, very powerful figures who begin in Israel. At least the puppets are in Israel, and then we know that the tree goes all the way up.
I don't think that's what's happening for one fleeting second. I think this is the end of war. I think we're seeing a conflagration and a conflation of a dialectic which has been rotting the soul of humanity for the best part of the last century, since the Balfour Declaration. Mm-hmm. And that is now being conflated into a final showdown. I think you will find that the Zionist motherfuckers in Tel Aviv are being pitted against the mad mullahs in Tehran. I think that this is a dialectic that is being forced into a standoff between the two extreme elements of what was otherwise intended to be a clash of civilizations. That was what Khazarian, Sabbatean mobsters, satanic cultists, and the Molochite worshippers were trying to do. They were trying to conflate a clash of civilizations by fundamentalizing the Israeli mindset, and by fundamentalizing the Judeo-Christian mindset, and fundamentalizing the Islamist mindset at the same time. So the bankster element and the priest bankster element through the Gulf states, you could say, who's responsible for having tried to fundamentalize Islam? Well, it's the more laid back Islamic countries that have been the bankers for those elements. Who are the bankers for Tehran and the Gulf states? Who are the bankers for the Southeast Asia? Who are the ones that have been financing mosques every 5 kilometers through the entire spine of Indonesia over the last 40 years? That's coming from Qatar, Bahrain. So the point I'm making is that where the money has been hijacked and held and contained, and the troglodytes working on behalf of the black nobility, the central bankster mobs out of Basel, Switzerland, and the Vatican and the Crown of England, essentially, they have been literally just following orders and edicts. You meet with some of these mandarins, they're absolute morons. These are not clever people. These are functionaries. These are troglodytes and functionaries, and they hold sophisticated positions, get sophisticated salaries. They have no morality whatsoever.
That's why they get those positions.
Yeah, no, well, exactly right. They're functionaries of a satanic system. But that whole game is falling apart. So actually, I think what you may find is that Donald Trump has known that, and so has Vladimir Putin, and so to some extent Xi Jinping. I believe that there's an alliance between Trump, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin, and I believe that the takedown now is of that age-old cult of Baal. I believe that cult is being taken down right now. So is Netanyahu going to come out at the back end of this rinse cycle? No, absolutely not. What is Israel in any event? Israel is a state of being. So there was never supposed to be a state of Israel. It's a fucking abomination.
It is an abomination. I say it all the time.
Only Jew is a wandering Jew. End of story. So the mystical Jews hold the greatest wisdom flame on the planet, arguably, but they are wandering Jews. They are wisdom keepers. They're all around the world. Kabbalists. They understand the mystical traditions of that amazing faith. Yeah. But that, of course, was hacked and was butchered and bastardized, converted and weaponized. And so what you've got, Bibi Netanyahu, and then you've got the Zionist flanks, and then you've got these satanic people that run the Israeli defense force and so on. And when I say run, I'm saying the protocols, the way that these people interact is terrifying.
It is.
It's subhuman and anti-human as a culture that has been promulgated through the rank and file of the Israeli Defense Force. But who is really in control of what's going on? What does Israel stand for in the first place? I know people don't understand this. Israel, Isis, Ra, sun god, and Elohim. Yeah. So again, state of Israel as it is today will cease to exist. It will not be able to exist because it was always illicit under the rules of its own engagement. But how that is going to play forward, I think we're seeing a conflagration and a conflation that's happening right now in order to bring it to a head. And yes, there are forces who also believe that out of this conflagration comes 1,000-year reign of Lucifer. And in point of fact, that might even be true to some extent. Is that a terrifying prospect? No, it's not nearly as terrifying a prospect as of what we can see over our shoulder, looking back at what we've been through. World wars, blood economy, scarcity economy. We're still going to be moving into a matrix that is heavily controlled and contained and orchestrated and engineered. That's being planned. The whole smart city, transhuman enterprise is very much something which is going to manifest by virtue of the collective will of hundreds of millions of people who are still lost to their sentient self. But to you and I, well, certainly I could speak to myself and to the new earthers that I represented, our constituents, millions of them all around the world. No, we are fully organic, fully sentient human beings, Adamites. We are of the soil, and we are reclaiming, and we are restoring and reclaiming our full autonomy. We will not be participating in any of those bonds or contracts or smart cities. We will be building and embodying, enacting and manifesting the new earth in real time. We're actually begun already. It's happening. So we're still going to see that bifurcation of the false light adulators, adherents, and devotees building into this kind of smart city trans enterprise. But that is a necessary function of the bifurcation.
Right.
Where do you stand in the equation? Where do I stand in the equation? Where does your audience listening in stand in the equation? That is the only question that
that's
matters.
always going to be the most important question, no matter what outcome or possibility we veer towards. That's always going to be the key to the liberation of this species. And the sooner people realize that and they stop looking towards the heavens, and I get these comments on my posts. Well, just wait till Jesus gets here. I'm like, well, you wait till Jesus gets here. I think we should do something now.
We've been waiting a long time, right?
Exactly. I fully believe that each and every one of us, we must be our own saviors. We have to take our sovereignty back in every way possible. And
even half Christians are realizing that, brother. They're waking up to that fact. Right. The second coming is a collective morphogenetic upshift. And we're taking the lead from the Christed flame of the teacher from Nazareth, absolutely, without any question of doubt. But he is not the only saint and the only avatar. And this kind of bigoted notion that he is, that you haven't been forgiven your sins by Jesus, go fuck yourselves. Anyone touting that, Stone Age bullshit.
Tell me about it.
No time left for that nonsense.
There really isn't. I'm just waiting for everyone to grow out of it. I'm trying to be as patient as possible because I have such little patience for that barbaric nonsense. Because I understand, and I was raised Catholic, but you come to a point when you realize the absurdity of it all, and you create a connection with the divine, with God, with Jesus, and then you really facepalm, and you realize the absurdity of it all, and the fact that all these people are still believing in this crazy fear prism.
Because they've lost track of one thing and one thing alone. You have an immanent relationship with the Master. Jesus, Isa bin Maryam, Jesus of Nazareth, whatever you want. I have that relationship. It is the flame, and I have that immanent relationship, and I've had it since the day I opened eyes as an infant and looked into this world. That relationship was there. That custodian was there. That guardianship was there. It was written into my flame. It's never left me, and I've remained true to it. But it's an immanent relationship. It is not an extraneous one. It's not external.
Right.
God knows if Jesus appeared in front of me, it'd be a fucking 3-foot zeta reticulant alien gray masquerading as Jesus. Let's be clear about that.
Right, right. So you've done some fascinating and incredible work with the World Hereditary Council, and you recorded testimony from Edmund Silva Jr. And that guy claims lineage from King Kamehameha. I'm screwing that Hawaiian up. From the king. And is making a case for Hawaiian sovereignty, right? So when you look at what's happening on the ground there, we saw the Maui fires. Some of us figured that out right away. We see the mega rich concentrating property and accumulating massive assets. And now there's been some devastating flooding. What are the globalists doing in Hawaii, and why is it so important to them?
It's an extraterrestrial stronghold. It's always been thus. I mean, there is an inordinate amount of and I would say veering toward the malevolent side of things. I can't speak to the wisdom of the natives of Hawaii. I have met with multiple kings and queens of Hawaii and hereditary elders and leaders and kahunas. I've over the years, King Edmund Silva Jr., Kele Silva Jr. Is a friend and somebody who I admire. Is he the only claimant to the sovereign kingdom of Hawaii? My understanding is that he's not the only claimant, but the World Hereditary Council is there to receive these testimonials. And, we're going to be dealing with a lot of internecine disputes along the way, and we're going to be ultimately taking the artifacts, the stories, the ancient treaties, and assimilating and learning and understanding and investigating them as part of the process of seeking truth and remedy, which is why I initialized the World Hereditary Council. It's something I've been planning for many, many, many years. And every time I almost set it in motion, I would meet with a grouping of hereditary elders from around the world, and then within a few weeks, I'd see them all at each other's throats, arguing. And I just thought, oh, fuck this. I mean, it's never going to get off the ground. And then eventually last year, about 18 months ago, the last 2 years, I thought, no, this is the right time. And so we decided to do it because the International Tribunal for Natural Justice is beginning, it's underway. Its last Judicial Commission of Inquiry, which is Commission of Inquiry into the doctrine of discovery, into the Vatican crimes. And that's something which I've been planning for 20 years. So that's finalized and that's underway. That Judicial Commission of Inquiry is already underway. There have been multiple hearings and seatings already. And bringing the World Hereditary Council into that doctrine of discovery investigation made a great deal of sense. So that's how the World Hereditary Council is going to be finding its feet, is as these stories emerge and come forward, these testimonials from the bona fide hereditary elders and leaders and kings and queens and sultans and rajas and paramount chiefs and chieftesses from around the world, as they come forward over the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. I believe it's a 5-year to 7-year process. I was hoping it would be a 2 to 3 year process, but the more we look at it, the more I realize we have literally tens of thousands of First Nation tribes to honor in the process. And part of this process is going to be significantly augmented by AI. So it could be that we can speed up the process tremendously using AI. I don't know. I am planning at the moment a World Hereditary Parliament to be built. It's already been designed to be built in Africa. I'm not going to say where at this stage.
No, I don't blame you.
I'll make this announcement later this year, but I know exactly where it is. I've been there. And that's where we intend to build the World Hereditary Parliament. The difference with this parliament is it will be restoring the hereditary leaders, indigenous elders and leaders, back to their thrones, because they were usurped and kicked off their thrones by the corporation. And this was really the Jesuitical conspiracy that issued through the Vatican. The Crown of England was very much a part of it, the Crown of the Netherlands, the crowns of Europe, once they had been subverted and usurped they began the same process of usurping the true sheikhs and sovereign kings of the Levant and of the Middle East. That all happened in the last century.
Yeah.
So most of the leaders that you see on the thrones today are not. They are the corrupted descendants of the corrupted brothers and uncles and cousins of the true kings and queens who were usurped and overthrown because they were. It's a bit of a story, put it that way. But the point being that the restoration of the hereditary leadership of the world is a necessary function of taking a backward step to restore remedy. Not that we want to be subjected to old kings any
Right.
as much as corporation kings, but I'm just saying in terms of remedy, you allow those thrones to be restored, and then it is incumbent upon those hereditary leaders. What have they learned in the last 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, when they were thrown out of their kingdoms?
Right.
They should have given some humility. Their divine right to rule came down to the street level, so they've been moved amongst us now. So as they get restored to their thrones, it's incumbent upon them to dissolve, to bring into dissolution their divine right to rule mandate and bring back the restoration of Homo sapiens sapient to Homo luminous. That's ultimately the alchemy of what we're going to see take place. But you have to go through the motions of first dismantling the satanic force known as governments, have to restore the hereditary thrones to some extent as a step back, and then we'll see the true resurrection, this immanent resurrection of Homo sapien as the morphogenetic upshift. That, of course, is really the ascension, the vertical ascension that we're moving toward. And I don't want to speak too much on that subject because it becomes very esoteric and abstract. We'll lose a lot of people along the way. What I can say is it's a profoundly beautiful geometry that we're facing as a species.
Yeah. So, we touched on this, but I want to go back to it because it's a question that lingers. The difference between satanic and Luciferian, and you say we're probably moving into a Luciferian, which is better than satanic. And I have a dear friend who is always, whenever I post something that mentions either of those two things, he always insists that I make a distinction between Luciferianism and Satanism because he said they're not remotely the same thing.
Opposite.
Can you explain that to my? Yeah.
Yes. In a sense, they're the opposite. So I'll take you back to Lucifer, God's most favorite, most beloved, fell from grace. Says who? Well, that would be a Catholic conspiracy. He didn't fall from grace at all. He took a dive into the abyss. God's most favored, the chosen one, fell into the abyss as the emissary of God and splintered into 1 trillion facets. And you and I, brother, are one of those facets of Lucifer. Let's be clear. And we're reassembling and reformatting. Now, the morphogenetic upshift is how Lucifer shattered into 1 trillion pieces and then restored through the aeon of the fiction of time, bringing with him, having dredged the galactic planes and brought into animus life itself. So we are, with the progenitors of the creation of the fabric of soul, and each one of us have been playing a role in that in our various incarnations. So again, it's a big story. It's a quantum story, and it's one which you have to approach without any sense of a hubris that you think you know jack shit. Because if you approach this kind of telling, this kind of story with any notion that you know what's what and what's not, you're not going to get it. You've got to be in a state of pure witness. You have to be in the I am. You have to be completely surrendered in order for that quanta to emerge. And then you see, my God, the perfection, the beauty, the geometry of perfection in the alpha and the omega of human life, of the trial of separation of self, of sufferance, of blood, of ritual sacrifice. All of these elements had a necessary function as part of this dissolution into the void, and then a reassembly into the next great stage of evolution. So again, it's an ineffable story that by its own nature should not be spoken to using words, because the words are so faulty. Even the way that we try and construct thoughts using words and using syntax is by definition broken and faulty. One of the great things, just to tail this off, and it's not an excuse, it's by way of I'm trying to really create an understanding of why there's a point at which we cannot speak to things. Because if they're ineffable by nature, they should not be spoken to. The Bible should never have been written. So put that in your put that in your pipe and smoke that for a moment.
Yeah.
The one true God always maintained that graven images were illicit, should never be written. So writing itself and script was all redolent of the trial of separation. It was how we were falling away from union and divine union into chaos. And so we started to create graven images. And that took us away from immanence, from the true knowing, because language itself, Babylonia, is a Babylonian function. We should not be speaking. I don't care how fluent you are in Spanish or French or Russian or Queen's English. All speech is a cry for help. All speech speaks only to the trial of separation. There's a reason why the Alpha Centaurian and the Arcturian and the Pleiadian and the Andromedan intelligences of the galaxy do not speak with tongue. They speak with telepathy because it cannot lie. We are now needing to relearn that. So as stellar linguistics and galactic linguistics come and become assimilated in the next few generations into our world, and they will be assimilated in. We're already seeing people all around the world speak these languages. But as we learn to not fuck with our children as they're being born, stop speaking to them for the first 2-3 months, only sing and dance and move with them, but don't allow them to remember their stellar linguistics. As those languages, Star Nation languages, come back in, we'll ultimately move into a dissolution of language altogether and a restoration of our capacity to transmit pure thought. Pure emotion and pure thought, absent any third-party agency, and language is a third-party agency.
Yeah, we're seeing it right now. If anyone has heard of the telepathy tapes, we're seeing it manifest right now in a number of ways. And I've always been a believer that is innate, that is in our DNA. But that part of our DNA has yet to unfurl because we do not have the spiritual acumen quite yet, nor are we ready as a species to have that kind of transparency with each other that will come with this kind of linguistics. So, but I have full confidence that we will get there. People. There's a religious prejudice that goes into all of this terminology. That especially as someone who was raised Catholic, a lot of people are the moment they hear certain words, it just the brakes are quietly pumped. The imagination quietly says, "Uh-oh," and then so there's very little room for, like you said, a detached conversation, if there should be one at all. But I do understand that there's a connection to the light that is in all of us, and I do know that at its root meaning that Lucifer does mean light, and I know that has been hijacked and perversed for a lot of different reasons, in a lot of different occult settings and certainly some religious, but at the same time, I believe that we all do have the light of God in us, and so I think I understand what you're saying, and I think I understand,
I'm saying that Satanists are into the desecration of God's children and God's creation, and they revel in butchering and bastardizing and destroying God's creation. Luciferians do not. Luciferians augment and inspire and uplift God's creation and want God's children to flourish, albeit in a controlled matrix still. But that's why the Luciferic is a necessary step
stepping
from
stone.
the Satanic age toward the luminous age. Yeah,
I see. Okay. So tell me about your past involvement with the UN, and I do a lot of. I tell everyone, I joke, I say, I could make the next 200 episodes of my podcast about the criminal legacy families of the Clintons and the Bushes. But you discovered something about the Clinton Global Initiative was up to while you were involved with the UN. Can you mention? I mean, I would
Sure,
love to hear a little bit.
happily so, because again, I'm a latter-day prophet when it comes to this stuff, and I'm happy for the first time in my life to put that little crown on my head and pat myself on the back. Because I've been wandering barefoot in the desert for many years, taking rocks up the head, when all I was doing many years ago was calling this stuff out,
Yeah.
way ahead of the curve. And being accused of being a Satanist myself, and accused of being an apologist for the Illuminati, or a crown agent, or a Vatican assassin, or whatever, all the shit that's been thrown at me. But the fact of the matter is, I called this stuff out in very simple black and white terms many, many, many years ago. I was warning the world about Barack Obama before he became president in 2008. I was warning the world about the Clintons and about the body count. Almost 20 years ago. I was screeching about it. I was meeting with leaders, meeting with religious and political leaders, doing my diplomatic work, always. I mean, that's why I've got respect today. That's why I can access pretty much any government or faith. I can walk in a red carpet because I've earned those credentials. I may look like a tawdry bohemian. I may even myself like one, but the fact is that if I choose to go into those portals of power and receive, end of story, because I've earned it, not because I'm a Vatican agent or because I got a fucking trust fund, because I don't. But the fact of the matter is that the CGI was the interface of the satanic globalist agenda buying out the basement of the United Nations almost 20 years ago. And when I hacked in 2009, 2010, for those 2 years, that was part of what I was looking to learn about, was to understand who or what is orchestrating from within the belly of the multilateral arena. So I became a director general. I refused a salary. I refused an office in the UN. I became a director general in the intergovernmental sector, which gave me tremendous access and the ability to be able to make certain moves. I did that work, incidentally, with Dr. David Martin. He and I were just yesterday, we're doing an interview together.
Nice.
For the launch of the New Earth Exchange coming up on Wednesday. And David and I were just reminiscing a little bit about that time, about what we were getting up to 17, 16, 17.
I'm a big fan of David's. I have a lot of respect for David.
Right. And it was only in the last year that we for the first time came together, David and I, in Utah, at a talk that I was giving, and for a couple of hours he joined me on stage in a theater, and we spoke about what we were up to in the United Nations 17, 16 years ago, what we were trying to do. It was quite historic what we were trying to do, which I think we planted certain seeds that are now beginning to flourish, put it that way. But the baseline being that, yes, we saw how the Clinton Global Initiative was really the fence being used to funnel Chinese money, Communist Party money, through the billionaires that were allowed to fly in and out of China. They were interfacing with the UN in New York. They were buying out ambassadors and permanent representatives. They were buying out NGOs and IGOs and financing them. Christ knows I was offered limitless money through the Moonies, through the Unification Church. And then again, I was offered money also through the Chinese billionaire set. Back in the day, I never took a dime into my foundation ever once, not one single dime did I ever take into my foundation. And I only wound the foundation up about a year ago after 25 years. So I founded my foundation, Humanitarian, in 1999. By last year, I believe it had fulfilled its mission, and I wound it up. And because the New Earth mantle that I've created has now taken things forward, and we've established now as a irrevocable, ecclesiastically protected universal church, and we'll do what the fuck we please. And that's how we're launching this new banking system, this new sovereign banking treasury and exchange for ourselves, for the world, essentially. Anyone who wants right action and prosperity in a 0-point economy, that's a prosperity economy. We're about to change the world, I believe.
It's got to happen, and I'm big in, I'm friends with Danny Sheehan. I'm sure you've heard of Danny Sheehan.
I was with him fairly recently, actually. I saw him. We were on a panel together.
Nice. Yeah. Danny's he's done a lot of good, and he's on the front lines fighting for this massive cover up that's been going on for God, over 100 years, trying to get the technology pried out of the hands of these contracted aerospace agencies, which of course would change the very structure of society if they were to ever come out, which is why there's such a massive pushback on it.
Subject greatly. So
Yeah.
don't tempt me. I'm very involved right now in
Yeah.
advanced aerospace. Yeah.
So what? Well, now I got to ask. Some of us know, there's been a secret space program for decades. Some of us know they've been sitting on this technology. Others think we're crazy, but when you do enough research and you read enough testimony and see enough evidence, it's hard not to make up your mind. And so what I'm wondering is, do you think that this is going to be able to? First of all, there's also a factor of human ingenuity, and people, what is in the consciousness is able to be tapped by the human beings, and so we see people, and unfortunately we're seeing them killed off a lot of times. But I think it's just a matter of time before either A, they find a way to wrestle it out, or B, somebody comes up with it and manages to get it out into the public so that it cannot be stopped, so that the idea of it can be produced in a way that is going to free people from the energy monopolies that some of these families have foisted over this planet. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not quite sure what the question was, but if you're aiming at free energy and over unity, vanguard science and technology, then that is my wheelhouse. That's my specialty. It's the reason why I was headhunted by the United Nations 20 years ago to become Director General in the renewable energy sphere and the innovative technology sphere, was because that was, even 20 years ago, my focus. 16, 17, 18 years ago, I was very involved. And I became Director General in that theater for that reason, in order to bring forward breakthrough energy technology solutions and remediation technologies for oil spills and depleted uranium and God knows, cleaning up the rivers and the oceans, all the rest of it, as well as obviously so-called over unity free energy systems, which could slam dunk a century-long petrodollar hegemony of humanity. So that's the stronghold of the Khazarian satanic mafia.
Yes.
So I went head-to-head with that with Dr. David Martin, rounded up the Gulf states, got them all to agree to give us $1 billion each. We were raising a $5 billion fund, me and David Martin, called the Exemplar Zero Global Infrastructure Finance Trust.
Wow.
Easy gift. And we asked each of the Gulf states if they would give $1 billion each to create a $5 billion fund, which we were then about to use to free up these technologies and bring them rapidly to market whilst I held the office of Director General. And that was my little conspiracy and David's little conspiracy and the good team we put together. And good leaders wanted us to succeed at that. Good governments were rooting for me and rooting for us.
Of course.
But unfortunately, 11 days before the summit event, they sent in the Gestapo at a dawn raid and arrested my team, thinking I was with them in Kuwait City. I wasn't. I was in London. And they were the satanic forces tried to thwart that summit because I had world leaders flying in. I had finance ministers flying in. I had energy ministers flying in. We were literally about to slam dunk that satanic old oil and gas, petrodollar hegemony, and bring a new plan called the Exemplar Zero Initiative into play, where over a period of 10 years, we were going to transition from oil and gas hegemony into these new quantum solutions. So we had it all mapped out beautifully at the time. That was before AI as well. We did a hell of a legwork to do that. But 11 days before the summit, they swooped in, arrested my team, looking for me, didn't get me. I was in London. It took me 10 days with my team to then produce the summit, not in Kuwait City, because they'd been weaponized, but in New York, which we did at the UN Millennium Plaza. And a lot of good people turned up to that. But we had to basically walk away because the Gulf states then lost their nerve. The $5 billion that had been pledged to the fund was withdrawn. And David and I gave each other a hug and said, well, we tried.
Yeah.
We walked away. But like I said, I believe we planted certain seeds at that time, which have now come into fruition. And certainly I lived to tell the story.
Yes,
David
you did.
lived to tell the story. And we are now on the front foot. I am now in possession of... I just want to be very careful what I say before the launch.
No, I understand.
But I am in possession, New Earth, we are in possession of hundreds of billions of dollars worth of projects and programs and power purchase agreements that are going to be part of the new economy in the coming days. It has already flipped. The script has flipped. And in the coming weeks and months, certainly this year into 2027, we will see a whole new terrain unfold in front of us, which is going to impact beyond imagining the global financial system from what it has been, a draconian fiat system, into being this new quantum system, stable coin / quantum system. Yeah, smart contracts and all the rest of it. So all the best of technology today, but also keeping in line, keeping tuned into the noble values of the original Templar traditions. Okay,
right.
Let's just leave it at that.
I think I understand, and that's amazing. That work that you and David did, and the fact that you got it even up to 10 days is, in my mind, quite divine. You know, that's, and then you were able to pull it off. It doesn't surprise me that those countries pulled out. We've seen, I mean, shit, we've obliterated capitals and, you know, taken out leaders for that exact purposes. So it's amazing you all got out alive and those ideas were planted. I think probably it went the only way it could have. I think if you got farther, there would have been violence, you know. So I think things.
It was planned. We uncovered on the day.
I'm sure. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all.
What was planned, and it wasn't fun. Yeah.
So that worked out probably the only way it could. Thank God. You know. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk. We mentioned Epstein earlier, you know, and he's become synonymous with these satanic global power networks. But, you know, I mentioned kind of offhand, like the opinion of that one person who said, you know, well, he's also playing a role. How do you understand his role in this broader?
Sorry, I didn't even get the name. Who are we talking about?
Oh, Epstein.
Oh, Epstein. So again, I would caution that I wouldn't be surprised if Jeffrey Epstein turned out to be a double disinfo operative, sipping a Campari on a beach somewhere right now. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
But I honestly, because I've just seen things flip 180 degrees over the years, I'm disinclined to think that that's likely, given the testimonials of people, of these younger women. But then on the story of Harvey Weinstein is not who you think he is. He's not what the world's been led to believe. And, you know, Harvey Weinstein is the collateral prince of Hollywood, who was literally groomed, set on fire, torched in broad daylight at a given point, which was an opportunistic moment for the Satanists in Hollywood to rearrange the furniture in the basement. So he was what you call a collateral prince, in the same way that Prince Andrew could be regarded as a collateral prince, somebody who was always slightly marginalized to the side in terms of importance, who at a given point could be doused in petroleum and have a match flicked at him to set him on fire as a decoy to take away the focus from rearranging the furniture.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been telling everyone. I was like, this is, you know, this is all for show. You know, like they're not.
That's standard play. I call them collateral princes.
Yeah.
And they always get the worst deal. So Prince Andrew's getting the worst deal. Harvey Weinstein's getting the worst deal. Okay. Jeffrey Epstein obviously didn't kill himself. Obviously, he was exfiltrated. Obviously, he's safe and sound, living in a military base just outside of, I think it's
Tel Aviv,
probably, or Hamburg in Germany. So that last I heard from Intel. So I've no doubt that he's been held back as an asset. But honestly, I just don't know. It could even be some of the women who've made claims are also part of an orchestration. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know. And I don't want to conjecture. I don't want to speculate. What I know is that all of it is heinous. Yes. All of it is nefarious. All of it is egregious. Where there is crypto anything, where something is hidden from God's light. It is nefarious by nature. It's egregious by nature. And
JFK
I think
said that. Yeah.
Well, indeed, we're just moving now into a new age where we don't need skullduggery. We don't need covert agendas. We don't need clandestine meetings and to orchestrate agendas. We're leaving that serpentine age behind. And that's why everything should be as irreverent as possible, in as much as irreverence toward imposed authority. That's why I drop F-bombs. It's because I don't want to be cloaked in sanctimony. I can easily be confused for being a spiritual consciousness teacher. I'm certainly not that. I probably know a great deal more than the average Jack in those. But the point being, it is time for all of us just to be true humans. Red blood, feet in the mud, and just own the nature of the Adamite. And hallelujah, I am the highest ranking technology in the omniverse as a human being that is connected to the immanent flame of my creator. Why? Well, that's because I am creator.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you, brother, 100%. I think that Epstein is obviously alive. I love making videos about surveillance camera footage failures, and how they just always seem to fail around these events. Everything from Princess Diana's death to, which I'm sure you probably have a story about more than I do.
I know members of the family, so yes, I know the inside scoop on this.
So was she? So what was she? I mean, obviously, I don't believe for a second it was a car accident. But is she alive, or was she taken out?
You'll find half saying that they were nodding a wink, yes, and the other half are kept in the dark themselves and don't know. But who was Diana? Who was Diana's father? Her father was not the Earl.
No.
Earl Spencer. That's for sure. Frances Shan Kidd was her mother, but her father was Jimmy Goldsmith. That's something. Goldsmiths, married into the Rothschilds. So we're talking Illuminati either way. I know members of the Goldsmith family as dear friends of mine, much beloved friends who I've learned from and converse openly with. The point I'm making here is that it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. It doesn't matter now if you're highborn to the Illuminati. It depends on what's awakening within you. I know so many members of these families who have walked away from the trust funds and walked away from the Masonic aprons and walking away from the covenants and the spells and the bonds. They want nothing to do with it. So those families, the black nobility, I can't speak to, although I'm supposed to be very close friends with the Black Pope, so I keep reading because my former promoter in rock and roll, Ciro Orsini, is a beloved friend and wonderful.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, he said he has nothing to do with the black nobility, but he happens to carry the name Orsini, and as do 5,000 other people carry the name. And in truth, he was the great grandson of a maid that was fucked by the Prince of Orsini, and so they carry the heraldic crest. They're allowed to, but they're no part of the Orsini clan. And no access to the enclaves of the Orsinis, but because Sacha Stone or Ciro Orsini have been seen together, it must be the Black Pope, and that's become a kind of fun story that's emerged over the years. But no, I do know about the Orsinis, the real Orsinis. I know about. You mentioned the Rothschilds earlier. The Rothschilds are the flunkies of the Payzeurs. We're always the flunkies of the Payzeurs. And the Payzeurs is the lineage of Marie Antoinette and the lineage of, from France, just leading up to the French Revolution. And that's a story that the world doesn't know yet. At a given point, I've got to say something. I'm working with some of my own team right now to see if we can create an engine in the next year that you could speak to the engine, AI CGI engine. You can speak, and as you're speaking a story, like you and I having a conversation like this, and it start to AI literally map and create the story in real time.
Ooh, that'd be awesome.
Hyper-realistic. Obviously, you need super computation there, but we'll get it. But wouldn't that be magnificent? Because
that would be amazing.
To some of these stories and have them animated hyper-realistically in real time. Because that's the point. We're going to be there within 2 to 3 years. We're going to be at that point where the spoken word will translate instantly into very advanced, hyper-realistic CGI, and that's going to take our capacity to educate ourselves and unfuck our minds from bad education at a quantum level. That's coming. That's coming.
That's going to be beautiful. My God, just in time too, because these kids that I mean, the bullshit that we learned in school was bad enough, but the bullshit that they're learning in school is even more useless. I mean, at least they tried to tell us stories. These kids aren't learning anything. They're learning about literally jack shit. I'm just like, my God, I mean, of course, history is just that, his story. And I'm always trying to educate my kids about, listen, let me actually tell you what happened in World War I, because what they're going to teach you in school is not even remotely relevant or even true. But, so we know these new systems have to come online, right? But how are we going to navigate and keep them from, how are we going to keep the long-standing agenda of the New World Order to consolidate power through, whether it be, a climate change or a fake alien invasion, or if they get
withdrawing attention? It's always the same answer. Forgive me for interrupting you. It's just that I know where this is going, and it's just about withdrawing life force. If we continuously circle jerk and attribute our life force, our prana, our energy, our attention to these subjects and speak to them and give them attention and talk about them at the breakfast table and debate them in the universities and continuously, it's a preponderance of continuous feedback looping. And I'm not there. I know where I am. I know that I'm barefoot, wearing a sarong most of the day, dealing at the moment with some of the world's leading traders and economists and financiers on a daily basis, and engineers, building a new system, building a new rails for a global financial system that belongs to people who choose to step out of the false light adulation adherence into this new prosperity, 0-point true cost economics financial system. And finances to me are an abomination. So money is an abomination. And I don't have a great relationship with it myself. I don't like it. I don't like touching it. I don't like thinking about it. But I've been forced into it, because as I've been evolving the New Earth movement, with our teams around the world, we've perfected jurisdiction, we've perfected technology incubation. Like, we've got our own free energy systems that we're bringing online this year. I don't need permission from anyone to do that. We're doing it in our own jurisdictions because we've got our own jurisdictions lighting up around the world. But one thing we needed was the capacity for those jurisdictions to be able to transact,
right,
with absent third-party intervention. Hello. Then we had to understand about the Visa rails and the MasterCard rails and the off-ramping and on-ramping and banking and all these different systems, and how to be able to contain fully and bring on board our own constituents from around the world, millions of people who've got their own savings, their own assets, their own gold and silver. How can we build a treasury, and we can literally lock into that treasury the keys and the value that we are trading and dealing with internally, so that nothing can ever hack into it. No government, no Pentagon, no Vatican, no Crown of England, no global BIS, IMF conspiracy can ever, or SEC or IRS conspiracy could ever hack into. We've done it. We know that language. We understand it. Why? Because people from those institutions, leading figures, are the architects of this new system that we're bringing online. So my point I'm making is this. If I personally, and I'm not diminishing the need for investigating truth. I'm not diminishing the need for punditry. I've been a pundit for years. I've just personally determined to withdraw, and I'll tell you why. Because I saw the onset of chaos. Ordo ab chao is written onto the US dollar bills for a reason.
Wow.
So when it is orchestrated chaos, the smart man pulls the fuck away from the dialectic and goes and sits in the forest for a while and chews mushrooms or does anything other than participate in the dialectic. So for me, it's a curiosity to hear things like from our African director this morning. Oh, he can't leave Lusaka to head to the palace in Mongu in Barotseland because they've literally stopped. There's no fuel in Zambia today. That all of a sudden, all the stations. That's interesting information for me. I'm going to speak to the rest of our teams in Southeast Asia and Central and South America, and I'm going to pass that information on. So I'm a pundit. I'm interested. I'm paying attention to what I'm
Right.
hearing in the grapevine, but I don't want to be participating in anything that relates to what's being broadcast to the mainstream, because that is utterly composed and orchestrated. And we're not going to get any closer to the truth. We're going to get a whole lot closer to the truth by simply putting our time and our emotion, our life force, and our attention towards building the new in your own backyard. So that for me is absolutely where it's at in the year 2026.
No, I understand completely, brother. I also enjoy being a pundit of sorts. I enjoy revealing information because I think some people need to hear that information to understand just how desperate we are and should be to create something new. A lot of people are unaware just how broken and corrupt the system is. Not so much as it was 5 years ago, certainly not, 10 years ago, even less, but more and more people are waking up. And sometimes I think people need, not literally, but figuratively, a slap in the face to realize that something is amiss, something is not right, and we are missing something. And so, I do think there's a place for that, as you said. But at the same time, I also understand how this universe works in my bones. I understand how powerful each and every one of us are, not only as a creator of our own destiny, as a manifester of the outcomes we want in this life, but also this co-conscious creation that we are quite literally with every second of our lives contributing to. And the more we can focus on what we want collectively, the faster we're going to bring it into existence. And that's the way that the universe works. And so I understand completely what you're saying. And, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Very good. Very good. Outside of that, I was just saying to my crew yesterday, for the next 6 months, I'm going to be speaking only on one track. I'm speaking to the need for everyone to get their assets, liquidate, get your assets, change the entire format of how you own your own home and set up your family trusts. We're launching a ghost wallet this week. Historic.
Nice.
We're launching a ghost wallet system with Visa rails, everything connected into private banking with the entire New Earth exchange in a thumbprint activated dongle. You are now part of the exchange. You are locked and loaded into it. You can step outside altogether of the global fiat banking system and have full autonomy and control. It is so exciting what we're bringing online later next week. And in the course of April, May, June, I'm going to be exclusively speaking to the subject, giving tutorials, bringing our economists and bankers and traders online so they can explain to people how this is all moving forward to becoming the new mainframe for people who are serious about truth, serious about disclosure, serious about
sovereignty.
And sovereignty. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to finish with one question, and then I want you to tell everyone after that question how, because I'm obviously I'm going to be tuning into some of these seminars, and I'm going to be going to them, and I want to continue to educate myself, and I'm very interested in everything you're doing. So we'll get into that, but I want to give you one just a couple of minutes, however long you want, to answer a question which I think is a perfect made for you. So we want to elevate the consciousness of this world in the midst of everything seeming to be descending into chaos. So what is the one thing that we can do both individually and collectively that is going to make a difference in that?
You asked the perfect question, and there is only one perfect answer. And you make it very, very easy for me. So I'm very grateful to you, because for me, it is the simplest answers, the easiest answers, the most truthful answer, because it's absolute, which is pure truth and right action in the living moment is the path of least resistance to the highest outcome, always, in all ways. That's it. Pure truth right here, right now. Right action right here, right now, in this living moment, because I choose pure truth, and I choose right action right here, right now. That is my path of least resistance to the highest outcome, which means the escape from the matrix. It means my stairway to heaven. It means the greatest benediction I can receive from God, and the greatest benediction I can give to God is to be standing in pure truth and conducting right action in the living moment.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. I'm so glad I asked that question. Sacha, tell everyone where they can keep up with you, where they can, if they want to check out all the stuff you're doing, where they can find you across any platform or website.
Hashtag catch me if you can. I just have no interest. I mean, thank you for that. I'll tell you what, how are people going to be able to follow I personally am stepping away from social media. This is my last year. So this is my last year of that kind of pantomime. And I'm going fully into the mud in Africa and Asia. And
well, I'm glad I got a hold of you while I did.
Building the new earth, and we'll be broadcasting that to the world through our own channels, and we're having fun. But for the moment, the New Earth Exchange launches this week. That is the thing everyone needs to know about. Let me suggest this: SachaStone.com. Okay. SachaStone.com, and I'll make a call right now to our IT department and make sure that there is a springboard on SachaStone.com that gives an indicator of where people can watch the New Earth Exchange launch.
Oh, awesome.
Actually, they can watch at the Lazarus Symposium. So LazarusInitiative.com or SachaStone.com.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome, brother. For everyone watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on iTunes and Spotify and all that jazz, please drop us a review. If you enjoy this conversation, let me and Sacha know, and please share it, because we're always fighting an uphill battle with these algorithms and censorship, and so we need your help. And thank you again for listening, Sacha. Thank you, brother. This has been an incredible conversation. I'm so glad we had it, man.
Very grateful to you, and I'm going to ask Dr. Manelli, who's running my office, to give me your phone number so we can have a private chat.
That'd be awesome. I'll send it over to the email I have. Thank you, brother.